Ladies and gentlemen, we look at how certain franchises started in the NHL, but this one is kind of unique. Now, when Thomas Joseph Duggan, a very important entrepreneur and sports promoter back in the 1920s and 30s, decided to get into Major League Hockey, he was the co-owner of the Montreal Arena, but wanted to have his own goal in the NHL. He eventually brought in the New York Americans to the NHL. Now, born January 9th, 1882 in Montreal, the Canadian sports promoter had interests in horse racing, dog racing, arena management, and eventually ice hockey. Now, he was involved in advertising and real estate activities in Montreal before becoming involved in one of his first sport ventures, the Buffalo franchise of baseball's upstart Federal League. When this league failed in 1915, he turned his attention to horse racing, helping to build a Montreal track in Montreal and a Devonshire track in Windsor, Ontario, which had opened in 1916 in partnership with American entrepreneur Grant U. Brown. Now, in 1919, when Montreal's Jubilee rink burned to the ground, he joined up with George Kennedy, the owner of the Habs, the Jubilee's tenants, to build the Mount Royal Arena on the south side of Montreal Avenue between Clark and St. Aubert streets. From there, Duggan and Kennedy promoted boxing, wrestling, and hockey events under the banner of the National Sporting Club, and Duggan tried to get a franchise in the NHL for an English Montreal team to complement the Canadians. When unsuccessful, he turned his sights southwards and obtained rights for NHL franchise in the United States, where the league was looking to expand to thwart competition, selling one franchise to Boston grocery magnate Charles F. Adams and keeping another for himself. Financed, get this, by bootlegger Bill Dwyer to play in New York's Madison Square Gardens. Now, despite setbacks in Boston, where he accused Adams of reneging on a deal to give him half the province, and New York, where an onerous lease arrangement constrained the profitability of the Americans, Duggan continued to be active in various attempts to expand the NHL into the U.S. Northeast in the later part of the 1920s. At this time, he also became interested in greyhound racing, but failed his attempt to introduce the sport into Chicago Stadium. He had shifted his hope to establish the sport in New York when he died suddenly in his home in Montreal on July 22nd, 1930, at, get this, the young age of 48. Now, coincidentally, he died shortly after being interviewed about the sudden death of Paddy Harmon, the builder of Chicago Stadium and another failed NHL aspirant. Although Duggan was an important pioneer in the expansion of pro hockey in the States, his legacy has often been overlooked in favor of other men like Tommy Gorman, Tex Rickard, and Bill Dwyer. As Baz O'Meara wrote in the Montreal Daily Star, essentially a pioneer and trustful to an unusual degree, he lost a considerable portion of the fruits of his vision. Duggan had predicted that hockey would be the greatest attendance getter of all sports in America, and, while it never rivaled baseball, during the Depression, it superseded boxing and other sports and proved the salvation of many arenas, including MSG. Ladies and gentlemen, the only reason why there's an MSG around in 2023 is because by bringing hockey in, and it's like I said, a very popular sport, and with the press as well. Boxing was hit and miss. Wrestling was hit and miss. It was in a downturn, and hockey made it go. But you look at the story I did on Stan Fischler about his appreciation of the New York and Brooklyn Americans, it all comes down to Tommy Duggan. But imagine the age of 48, he would probably got a second Canadian franchise into Montreal, and there has been rumors for years that his efforts were being looked at for quite a while, that the possibility of Montreal Canadiens having one side of Montreal and another Montreal team on the opposite side of Montreal. Similar to you have like with the old New York Yankees and Giants back in the day, because Montreal is a hockey heavy town. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the latest in our vintage podcast on some of the NHL of the 20s and 30s. If you let us know how we're doing, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, and don't forget, requests are always appreciated and always highly considered. Thanks for listening. Bye.